All right, welcome everybody. Looks like we are live. How's everybody doing tonight? I don't know if I'm frozen here. I think my screen might be frozen. Hello. Yeah, looks like, no, that's not what I'm trying to do. Okay, looks like we're live, everybody. How's everybody doing tonight? Welcome to another episode of Sasquatch Out of the Shadows Live. As always, I'm your host, Alex Pedikov. Welcome to this awesome Monday night here. As always, the best way to kind of break up the week here. So last week, we had a fun show. I did a solo show, talked about upcoming projects, chasing legends, all kinds of stuff. Showed some pictures, some behind-the-scenes pictures. We also did our raffle, the charity raffle, a holiday cryptid charity raffle. I guess that's what we're calling it. So basically, we raised around $150, which is awesome. So I will be sending that money to Merlin's Kids, which is an organization that, they rehabilitate dogs and use them as service dogs for special needs kids. Really awesome mission. So it was really awesome. Thank you guys all who participated. We're going to be drawing the prizes. We're going to be drawing for the prizes live. So we've got the prizes here. We're going to draw all the names out of the Wookiee head here, kind of appropriately themed. So we'll be doing that, but we're actually going to have on some pretty awesome guests. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't seen the other episodes, just feel free to go into the channel, check out the playlist with previous episodes. We have a lot of awesome streams. A lot of these guests we'll have on tonight have been on the show as well previously, so it's a lot of fun to have them back on. Next week, we're going to be talking to Chad Lewis, Kevin Nelson, and Joe Tury about their upcoming documentary about the Big Muddy Monster, which is a Bigfoot-like creature in Illinois. Really awesome-looking film. We've had Chad on previously, Chad Lewis. You might remember him from a while ago. So it's going to be awesome to have him back on. But this week, we're going to be doing a cryptid panel discussion kind of thing. We're going to talk about different cryptid topics. We're going to have on some awesome folks. We've got Karac St. Laurent of Crash Course Cryptozoology. He's been on the show before. We have Nash Hoover, of course, of Chasing Legends, one of the producers and investigators on Chasing Legends, as well as Eli Watson of Campfire, who's also on Chasing Legends. So we're all friends here. So without further ado, let's bring everybody in the stream here. All right. How we doing, guys?
Doing good. How are you doing, Alex?
Good. Just teleported everybody in here. Looks like we're all in the same space.
Oh, and I'm the host of Chasing Legends, by the way. So just to clear the air.
So we're already starting with the quarrels, I see.
I say he's chasing drama right now.
It's just against you, but...
But anyway, so hope everyone's doing well. As you can see, here's our sort of cryptid discussion panel here. And basically what we'll do, guys, is let's talk about each of the topics for a little bit, maybe give our initial thoughts, kind of where, not necessarily where we stand. I mean, you don't really have to say whether you believe something's real or not, but a little bit of background on the topics, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper into it. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
All right, well, right off the bat, let's dive right into it. First topic is going to be Bigfoot/mystery hominids. So that'll include stuff like the orang pendek, the yeti, that sort of topic. So let's start out. We'll go in the circle here. We'll start out with Nash. What are your, just throwing you on the spot here, Bigfoot, what do you know about it? What do you think about the subject?
So Bigfoot was the Bigfoot phenomenon was one of the first things that I kind of got into when I first started researching cryptids years ago. So I've done a lot of research, done some field research. Obviously, Alex, Eli, and I, went to Arizona past July and did Mogollon Monster research, and I've done a lot of personal kind of from home research on a lot of these subjects from all over the globe. I don't just specifically research the ones here in the United States. I
Sure.
focus on a lot of the ones around the world, because there are a lot of ones that don't get talked about as much in the mainstream kind of cryptid field that do
Sure.
have a lot of really good stories to them. So I mean, I think with me, I'm kind of on the side of it as being an unidentified animal, some sort of mystery hominid, something that hasn't been fully explored, fully discovered, fully, researched in terms of what we can actually classify as an animal. And I think that a majority of the ones around the world are all kind of the same species, or they're, subspecies of one another, obviously, because there's, smaller ones that get reported with like the orang pendek. It's talked about being more of like 4 or 5 feet tall versus your kind of reported 8 to 9, what you get with like the typical Bigfoot kind of Sasquatch stuff. Oh, excuse me. So that for me is kind of what I feel about it. I mean, I think the Bigfoot stuff's awesome. I think it gets over glorified sometimes.
Sure.
I think when people think about the cryptid field or cryptids and cryptozoology, their mind immediately goes to Bigfoot. And, when I kind of have explained to people what I do, they, like, oh yeah, I do like cryptids and stuff like that. And their immediate like reaction is like, oh, like Bigfoot and stuff. Like, yeah, like Bigfoot and stuff. But I mean, it's kind of become the poster child, but I mean, I guess there's worse cryptids out there to be the poster child of the field. So
fair enough.
We digress.
Yeah, no, awesome. Yeah, perfect way to kind of, I definitely agree with a lot of those points, and I'll share my thoughts briefly, but let's go to Mr. Karac here. And I just got to read this comment, though, from Kevin before we bring you on. Kevin's saying, if Karac just added the magnificent to his name, he could definitely pass as a Vegas magician. and looks like there's a comment from Squatch with attitude saying, I am not an animal. So sorry to offend you. I mean, we're humans are animals too, so we're
exactly
all
right.
Animals.
We're just
Karac, take the floor, my friend.
Sure thing. Well, I definitely think that I kind of echo the same sentiment that Nash has about the sort of the very animalistic nature of the Southern Sasquatch and other mystery hominids, as opposed to maybe a more, what would you say, paranormal approach or something along those lines. Obviously, I have John Bernard-Nichols' book right here, so I'm definitely a bit biased in that sense for sure. But I do definitely think that a good deal of the evidence for mystery hominids, and not just Sasquatch, is so reminiscent of great ape behavior, anatomy, every kind of like intentional or non-intentional tendency that it displays seems to really suggest that, which is one of the, I think, the most fascinating things about mystery hominids, especially when regarding things like orang pendek. There were reports of orang pendek before we knew about Homo floresiensis, and that's really weird. That's a strange. That's very weird. And in cases like Jeff Meldrum's talked about the Roger Patterson film and how a lot of things that we learned later on, decades later, about the anatomy of less human ancestors that we have were seen in the Patterson-Gimlin film decades before we ever found out about them. So my thoughts on mystery hominids are definitely that it's very possible and plausible that what we're dealing with is a set of as yet to be cataloged species of great apes around the world.
Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah,
well,
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. If you have a comment, go for it. I just figured we'd all kind of go. But yeah, go ahead.
To kind of add to that, I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize. I mean, obviously, if you're within the field, you kind of know, but stories of Sasquatch go way back even before the Patterson-Gimlin stuff. You've got Native Americans in the United States drawing pictures of what looked to be Sasquatch, and you got other cultures around the world. Their stories of the the big the wild man, the hairy man go way back. I mean, even look at the Yeti. That goes back thousands of years in the Himalayas. Right.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it's definitely something I wanted to bring up, just in terms of other cultures aside from our modern westernized culture talking about it. But Eli, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, for me, I guess I kind of echo what Karac and I guess what Nash was saying. I think Bigfoot could easily be an undiscovered ape species. I mean, there seems to be this ideology that humans are exclusively the only kind of apes that live on the planet. And, we kind of disregard, the great apes, gorillas, chimpanzees, and things like that, because they are so different from us, but it wasn't that long ago, only a couple thousand years ago, humans coexisted with Neanderthals. So, and those are far more human-like than, a chimpanzee or a gorilla. So I don't think there is, I think it might be a little ignorant to suggest that there's absolutely nothing else that is bipedal like us on this planet, especially when you're dealing with a place like the Pacific Northwest, which is a huge unexplored forest, rainforest, if you will, extremely dense environment, inhospitable. You could easily die out there. But you're dealing with the same thing in the Himalayas, because you have the jungles and the valleys. Everyone thinks the Yeti lives out in the snow, when actually 60 years ago, the top cryptozoologists were theorizing that they only cross over the snowy mountainous passes, that they actually live in the jungles, which would make sense if it was an ape, So that's kind of where I stand with it.
Yeah, really interesting. I would have to echo a lot of what the three of you guys have said. But also, I think, it's undeniable that there are some weirder aspects to this subject. The longer you've been in it, the more stories you hear of, if we want to say paranormal or high strangeness associated with certain Bigfoot things. Now, I really appreciate what Karac mentioned about the characteristics existing in great apes that we know about that are displayed behaviors that people report with Sasquatch. So, whether that's wood knocking as used by chimps, or the smells often reported with Sasquatch. I'm in Florida, in the South, skunk ape, the gorillas being able to control their scent glands. That's really fascinating. And also as well, something like the orang pendek, as you mentioned, the connection with Homo floresiensis, the stories from the Dutch that colonized the area, the people who lived in that area for thousands of years up until the modern day. I think a lot of these encounters in Russia and Siberia and in the Caucasus that almost have more of a Neanderthal-like appearance to them. I think there may be multiple things going on here, but I think in terms of the North American phenomena, we're dealing with more of the same sort of creature that's across the continent. There are those weirder aspects, as I mentioned. I think we can't ignore them. I'm not a proponent necessarily of some sort of paranormal stuff going on, but there's obviously a lot of strange stuff that we look into that isn't necessarily cryptid related, but is Bigfoot a ghost? Like, that's one of the questions that I always kind of wonder, if there's ghosts from other animals, would there be a Bigfoot ghost? I don't know. It's just something interesting to think about. I think the more we talk about all the possibilities, the more interesting the conversation gets. But I do agree with the three of you guys that I think it's some sort of biological creature, extremely elusive and cunning, and a lot smarter than people I think even give it credit. Because if you look at some of these cases where you basically have these things living on the outskirts of town, interacting with humans on a daily basis, and really initiating the contact. And that's something when you talk about research with gorillas or chimps or bonobos, these really intelligent apes, they're completely in control of whether you see them or not. They're the ones who initiate the contact. You just can't go waltz in and see one. When we talk about Diane Fossey and others who spent years and months and weeks just to be able to even see one. She would know they were around, but it would take them a while to establish contact. So I think there's a lot of really interesting possibilities within that. Now, we have some great questions coming in, but I think now is we're going to draw our first prize. How does that sound?
Sure.
Let's do it.
You guys do that too?
Yeah, I think Alex got a bit too close to the truth on that one.
What happened?
I don't know. Your audio went all crazy.
It's good now, though. It's good now.
Oh my God! Yeah, I don't know. I've been watching too much X-Files. Well, okay, I'll repeat that. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw one of our prizes here. So this one will be the Champ postcard set. So this is the one that's the awesome Champ postcard set that has all the Champ postcards that I've made. So we have all our names inside the bin here, the Wookiee head. So I'm going to shake it up and then pick a name out. So let's see who is one of our prize winners. So those folks who participated in the raffle last week, stay tuned. All right, we've got a name pulled out. Looks like we got Stefan. My buddy Stefan is the first winner. Stefan, you have the Champ postcard. So just so you know. All right. Well, that name is now out of the bin, so let's move on then. So what we'll do is we'll keep drawing the prizes throughout the course of the conversation, but we have one winner so far, and the other prizes, you know, the comic book and the track. We'll do it. We'll do the grand prize, which is the Freeman handprint. We'll do that one towards the end. So, yeah, that's gonna be a good one. But alrighty, so let's continue here. So Bigfoot. Do you guys have? I just want to kind of hear what you guys think about. Do you have a favorite Bigfoot encounter or story that you've heard? Or, you know, one of the stories from over the years, each of you guys can list off. So we'll do the same thing. We'll start with Nash. We'll kind of move down the list. You guys think? Is there one that sticks out in your head?
I have researched them all very heavily. I think for me, I think the orang pendek has always been kind of one of my favorites that I've kind of looked into, just because of how plausible it is. You know, in terms of the environment that it's said to live in, it's a very unexplored section of the world, and there's elephants that apparently live in this same jungle that rarely get seen, and that's a large and known animal that that hardly gets seen in this region. And so what's to say a 4 or 5 foot hominid can't happily live undetected for ever.
Yeah. And to add on to that, now you could even argue that an elephant isn't even trying to hide like a hominid is trying to do.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The whole thing about hominids hiding is so interesting because, and Alexander mentioned it earlier, there's plenty of scientific data to say that not only are primates, and especially great apes, kind of, they're good hiders, they're pretty inherently expert hiders. I mean, if you think about it adaptationally, I suppose it makes a lot of sense. They're nomads for the most part, so they're constantly coming up against relatively new threats. And the best way to avoid a threat is for it to never to have to be a threat in the first place. And the way you do that is you hide. And of course, something like the orang pendek being between 3 and 4 feet tall, that's even harder to see out there. That's like trying to spot one orangutan in an entire island of jungle.
Right.
So that's a really good point, that these are things that, hypothetically speaking, if they existed, would match the profile of how often they're seen in the real sightings reports pretty perfectly.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think Nash summed it up pretty well there. The orang pendek is one that definitely sticks out in my mind too, just because of all that we've mentioned. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the stories that go back in time with the natives of that area, the people that live in Sumatra and those areas, and they're used to all these animals. I mean, the Sumatran tiger, the rhino, the elephant, the orangutan, and they consider this to be different. And then you have that Homo floresiensis, that fossil evidence, which isn't exactly Sumatra, but it's not that far off. It's in the same sort of island country that is Indonesia. Really just interesting. And then something I even heard about years ago was, I guess, UN peacekeepers or UN people. So these were, Westerners that were living in some of these jungle areas. Indonesia is a country that's riddled with a lot of social problems. There's different ethnic groups, and there's been a lot of civil wars and insurgencies and those kinds of things. And, there's been a lot of Western presence there for quite a while, even after the Dutch colonization. But reports of, Westerners in the UN seeing one of these orang pendek just run off. I mean, that really is pretty interesting. If you already don't want to believe the local population, would you believe somebody from a credible institution? Now, I think it's silly to obviously brush off what the locals are saying, because they're the ones that live in that environment. They're dealing with everything all the time, and their ancestors have been there for thousands of years. So why you wouldn't listen to them, I don't understand. But that's, I guess, some of the arrogance that comes with some of that Western attitude. But yeah, definitely one of the really interesting hominids. And I mean, people have said that's probably one of the more likely ones to be discovered, which I hope that's the case.
Well, and to add some more, if I remember correctly, I feel like National Geographic actually sent a few researchers there for a while to see if there was any truth to this. And because I know there was a Destination Truth episode on it, and I feel like they interviewed the people and they basically said that they, and Josh Gates like flat out asked them like, do you believe that it's this thing exists? And they were pretty much like, it would be weirder for it not to exist.
Yes, right.
That's interesting. Now I just got to say, it looks like quick witty in the comments saying you guys are getting mentioned in Bigfoot Odyssey podcast now. I guess Bigfoot Odyssey is doing the stream too. Thanks. They're an awesome show as well. A lot of great guests. We've had Carrie on before in the past. Awesome, very awesome encounter. One of my favorite encounter stories that I've heard in a while. But anyway, back to the orang pendek. Yeah, it's one of those things that you really hope that it'll be discovered at some point, or at least there's some new evidence that comes out. I mean, I know there's been footprint casts, and people like Adam Davies and others have been there on expeditions, and it's not just like a lot of the Bigfoot stuff here in North America. Sure, there's very dangerous places you can go in North America to look for Sasquatch, mountain areas, parts of the area, Mogollon Rim, where we were, the Everglades down in the south. I mean, there's a lot of dangers, but Sumatra is a whole different story. I mean, you're going into these jungles where malaria is an issue, all sorts of parasites, tigers, really aggressive animals. So it's almost like a perfect place for something to stay hidden. And as you mentioned, I mean, it's almost weirder for it not to exist. Yeah, that's definitely an interesting take. And, those people that have been there on expeditions, it's no walk in the park. It's a life-threatening journey.
Right.
Just to get in that area.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. One of the reasons I think that it's a relatively reasonable conclusion to say that it would be strange for it to not exist is not just that there's so many credible witnesses, but really there is kind of this evolutionary kind of precedent for it, not just in Homo floresiensis. We have another species, which the name's avoiding me, but it was discovered in, I think, the Philippines recently, and it's another very small humanoid species. And alongside these two, in the further Asian...
Is that the story that the Abu Gogo is based on?
Possibly. There's
sure.
It's a very old story, so there definitely are parallels people have drawn to, like, oh, well, this story originated far enough in our past ago that this could have been referenced to small humanoids pretty easily, even if just handed down by a few generations, maybe through art or something. But yeah, that's one idea that we have about it. But we also have these other small humanoids, or human ancestors, I should say, out to the farthest east of Asia, in Japan and China. We have Manatagawa Man, and we have the Red Deer Cave people, who match Homo floresiensis almost exactly. They just have slightly different anatomy because of the region. So we have more and more of these small human ancestors cropping up. And I mean, the area of the world they're cropping up in is exactly the area in the world where we're getting sightings of these small human-like primates. So it's not that couldn't be coincidence, but it would be a really weird coincidence.
Yeah, it seems like that has the strongest fossil evidence of any of the mystery hominid kind of stuff. But Eli looks like he was about to say something.
Nothing. I'm just reading this conversation happening.
Yeah,
it's a great ape conversation.
And, yeah.
Okay, so let's go for it, Eli.
All I have to say is that humans are great apes as well. So it could have a foot like us and still be considered a great ape. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, well let's read some of the comments going on in the chat here. So I'm going to bring this one up by Kevin. This is just an interesting point. Kevin says, I think people who swear they've had encounters with Bigfoot would argue that they are undiscovered. I think unproven is probably a better way to put it. Absolutely. And for those people, I mean, they're believers, they're knowers rather. They're not, for them, they're not really trying to prove it. Maybe some of them, get propelled to try and prove its existence after they've had an encounter. I mean, that's certainly something I've seen. But I believe the comment we were referencing was apes do not have feet like a human, so it cannot be exactly a great ape. It has to be some sort of humanoid type deal. And I think, as we mentioned, I mean, great apes encompass humans. We're obviously a lot different than the other great apes, which would be the orangutans, the gorillas, and the chimps. But we're still more similar than we are different.
Right. And there is something to be said, I think, too, for the distinctions that we make between, well, what features define a non-human ape from a human ape. Because if it's anatomy, we kind of do run into an issue there, which is that anatomy isn't something that is attributable to a singular species most of the time. That's kind of one of the key things I think that is good to talk about when talking about these sightings of bipedal primates is just because humans are the only animals we know of right now that are bipedal doesn't mean that bipedalism is inherently a human property. It just means that we happen to be the only group that still has that. We came out on top of all the groups that had it.
And that's a term. What is it? Anthropomorphizing or something like that? Where
something like that, yeah. And
we do this with other animals, you know. If an animal looks human, like cartoons where a dog or a cat is dressed like a human walking upright, that's considered that's us taking our preconceived notion of what it is to be human-like and attributing to other animals. But that's like you said, bipedalism is not necessarily strictly a Homo sapien trait.
Right. And the reason that we're bipedal, well, one of the biggest ones is because of our foot structure. And what that might say surface level is, okay, well, then that's a human foot structure. What that kind of actually says is that means humans developed one of the feet that is good for walking bipedally. Yeah. And there's other ways to do that. I saw that. There's playing with
You're smart.
Well, thank you. But even getting into different, types of animals, it might be different kinds of bipedalism, but we've had plenty of bipedal reptiles. That's what theropod dinosaurs are. They're large bipedal reptiles. Bipedal birds, pretty much every bird is a biped. It's just a different kind of bird. So there's plenty of different foot models that work with bipedalism, and ours aren't the only kind. So when talking about, well, does having a human foot make an animal a human, it's like, well, at the most it makes them bipedal. I'm not sure if it would make it human necessarily. Yeah.
Carac's just learning these people.
Karac learns me every time I talk to him.
Oh, me too. It's awesome.
Hey.
So here's a cool comment from Jordan Warner. So he's a friend of the program, a fellow young filmmaker who's into this kind of stuff. He says, in Tom Slick's book, the Yeti is described being smaller in size compared to the 7 to 8 foot tall Sasquatch. Yeah, that's something that's mentioned. I think there's even what I've heard about the Yeti being that's a generic term for multiple creatures. So you'd have, there's like a larger Yeti. There's one that's almost bear-like. I know. I just found out recently that Brian Sykes unfortunately passed away, who was a genetic expert who did the Sasquatch study, I think in the early 2010s there with, and they did a whole documentary about it where they took in a lot of the Bigfoot and Yeti evidence, and he claimed that it was a bear hybrid of some kind, a new species of bear. But that is something that was mentioned, was that there's possibly different types of Yeti. That's another area. I mean, that whole area, whether we're talking about China, into Russia, modern day parts of Asia, is just a hotbed of activity in terms of different types of humanoid-like creatures. I mean, whether we're dealing with Neanderthals or some of the other ones, the Denisovans, all these different, Gigantopithecus, of course, which wasn't exactly directly related to humans. There's theories that it's closer to orangutan. And I know Karac was mentioning that on last week's show when we were talking about it. But it's just, there seems to be a lot going on there, and there's a lot of fossil evidence to talk about when you're talking about the development of human species and other ape species in that area.
Well, yeah, that part of the world has a lot of different regional names for, their big hairy man. You've got the Almas, the Chichunia, the Yeti. I'm only naming 3, but there's a bunch of other ones.
Oh, yeah. So here's actually, I just want to read this. This is from Mike and Tactical Bigfoot Research. He says the one in the Philippines, he says Homo luzonensis is the new find in the Philippines.
The one.
Yeah, thanks. He also mentioned that there was a new orangutan. I guess there was a Tapanuli orangutan. So there's, different kind of subgroups within species. I mean, with chimps, you have bonobos, which are like gorilla-sized chimpanzees, which are different from the regular sort of chimpanzees you think of, Planet of the Apes kind of stuff. Really interesting how the different. I mean, just think about humans. There's certain ethnic groups that are known for being extremely tall, and then there's some that are known for being small. I mean, in Africa alone, you have the Maasai people in Kenya are huge. They're 6+ feet, 7 feet, and then you have pygmy tribes in Africa that are, maybe a few countries away. That's all, separated by different types of environments, from a plains area to more of a jungle. But they're really small people, pygmies, compared to the Maasai. And Kevin brings up a point. He's saying maybe it has to do with Bergman's rule that animals tend to be larger the further north you go. That's definitely interesting. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, that could very well be. I think I talked to both Eli and Nash recently about to diverge from hominids for just a second, Wahila Sightings. Sure. Which is a name that Ivan Sanderson attributed to sightings of giant white wolves. And I think around 2 years back now, I did kind of a big case file on Wahila sightings. And one thing I found that was so fascinating is the succession of size in records of killed wolves increased, but with them increased the proximity to the North Pole. So every wolf that had topped the last wolf for being bigger was found further north than the previous wolf, and that's still continuing.
Wow.
So,
look at the one that they shot in Montana a couple years ago. It was huge, and they couldn't even determine what the hell that was for a while until they finally got proper DNA testing on it. It was just a normal regular wolf. It's just massive,
right?
Yeah, there was people spinning stories of the Shunka Warakin that was this creature, this legend that had come back, and maybe the Shunka Warakin was just a large wolf in that time period that was just huge, that it just looked so unusual.
Yeah, could be.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, guys. So I'm going to interrupt our awesome conversation to do another prize drawing. So as we're moving along here, so this one is going to be for the kind of the combo prize here, which is the Granite State Bigfoot comic book, along with the track. The track, which Karac recently did a little close up on, looking at some of the dermal ridge evidence on this track and whether or not there are dermal ridges. So that's the kind of the combo prize. And again,
Karac just puts up all the shame.
Granite State Bigfoot again is awesome comic book. Some of my favorite Bigfoot stories from New Hampshire. So let's do that drawing and then get back to the conversation. So we got our trusted Wookiee / Squatch head here. So let's pop his skull open. All right, let's see. Drum roll, please. Okay, Mike TBR. So that's Mike Tactical Bigfoot Research.
Ooh.
Mike, awesome. Congratulations, Mike. We'll put the Yeti head. We'll put the Wookiee head away for now. So, Mike, you are the winner of the Granite State Bigfoot comic book and track combo. So, hit me up afterwards, and we'll get these distributed, in a proper fashion. But anyway, all right, back. We got some questions coming in. We got some awesome people dropping some comments. A whisper to a screen, podcasting. Hey, came to support my boy Karac. Karac's awesome. Congratulations to Mike, Tactical Bigfoot Research. He's an awesome guy. He's always leaving some great comments and facts in the show, in the comments there every week. Awesome. But all right, let's take this question. I want each you guys to address this. Do you guys believe in a cover-up? So this is a Bigfoot Sasquatch cover-up. This is a question that always comes up, so it's always a good one to talk about.
Can I go first?
Go for it, Eli.
I'm dying to hear what you have to say.
I'm going to say no. I don't. I really don't. I don't know. Because I've heard those stories, where there's the special forces teams that go in, and they hunt down the Sasquatch, they all seem to be pretty melodramatic. But I just don't believe that's a thing. I really don't. I don't know how to explain it other than it just doesn't seem like it's something the government would be trying to do. They're like, oh man, we can't let Sasquatch get out. I can't think, you could throw in the argument about the logging industry. They don't want to, I don't buy that either. I think, was it you, Karac, who told me about a bird species that was discovered up in the Pacific Northwest?
The spotted owl.
The spotted owl, yeah.
I learned about that one through Alex. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't seem to have changed the logging industry in any significant way, shape, or form.
It actually did in the beginning. So there used to be a lot of logging of the redwoods in some of those areas. And I guess it was the late 80s, early 90s when they rediscovered the spotted owl. And that killed the logging industry in that area in certain parts of Washington and Oregon. still haven't recovered. Northern California, they're still suffering from that time period. So, but again, there's a lot more logging than there's just in that area. I mean, New England, Karac and I are both here in New England. New Hampshire and Maine. Maine's one of the top logging states in the country in terms of, the amount of logging. It's one of the biggest industries in the state. So, and I understand the argument that I think that there is a little bit of a conspiracy, and I will say that in the sense that, and I've said this before, why would you need to have special forces going in and kidnapping Bigfoot or whatever when they're seen, when you have a media that treats the subject like a joke? I mean, even when people from Finding Bigfoot have been on, Cliff and Bobo and some of these guys that are really like great researchers, they've been on some of these shows and they're just mocked relentlessly, or the show is, everything's just considered, Bigfoot's considered to be still that one creature, Harry and the Hendersons kind of thing. Even though in the movie Harry and the Hendersons, he had a family and they kind of talked about that at the end. But I don't think there really is a need for a large overarching conspiracy. But at the same time, I think there probably are some on some levels. I mean, we talk about mountain lions through my work with Lions of the East. I saw that there kind of is a cover-up with mountain lions in the eastern states, and New England especially, in some of the eastern areas of the country, where there is like and it creates a distrust, the way that it's kind of brushed off. So I think it's not this massive Illuminati-esque conspiracy, but there's definitely something going on, and there's a suppression of what's happening with the phenomenon. I'm sure there are plenty of rangers and people you can talk to that are open to the subject, open to the topic, and just kind of talk about it. But excuse me.
I guess the only thing I would kind of try to play devil's advocate is, all those missing 411 cases, especially, what is it? Dennis Martin, the kid who went missing in the Smoky Mountains, and it might be attributed to Sasquatch. And, if that's the working theory you're going with the missing 411 cases, is that a lot of them are caused by Sasquatch attacks. You might want to cover that up so people will still continue to go out into the woods,
Yeah, I understand that argument. I personally don't. I think there's a lot of strange circumstances when people go missing. When you're lost in the wilderness, all kinds of crazy stuff can happen. I think there may be a little bit of some cherry picking going on with that sort of stuff, but it's possible. I mean, there's a great story that I've heard of a kid who was, almost like claimed to be kidnapped by a Bigfoot somewhere while camping, tried to get in his tent or something like that. And I think it was maybe Bob Gimlin or one of the channels that talked about it. Yep. Bob Gimlin, the YouTuber, he talked about, if these things are apes, maybe they have a sense of loss, and maybe there's a Sasquatch female that lost their child. They see a human child and they try to steal it. And then, out of just a remorse, I mean, we've seen this with other apes, with gorillas in captivity. I think that famous one, Coco, had a pet kitten, and when the kitten died, Coco was depressed for days. I mean, they feel emotion similarly to us. They are obviously the closest living things to us. So we go through loss, they go through loss. Lots of other animals go through loss.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry, go on, Eli.
Just kind of interesting. I read that elephants have been known to bury humans sometimes. The elephants bury their own dead, but there's some funny stories about people who are just taking a nap only to wake up being buried alive by an elephant.
That is so interesting.
What do you guys say? Should we continue on this topic, or should we start taking some more questions? What do you guys think?
Good questions I'm seeing in here.
There are some really good questions I'm seeing too. I'd love to get to those. Definitely. I will say Eli is clearly in on the conspiracy, but
he's getting we know he's getting his paycheck from the guys. Yeah, the Illuminati. Okay, so let's take this question from Stefan. I like this one. When you meet a person for the first time, what is their reaction when you tell them you're interested in cryptids? This is a great one for all of us, obviously. Thanks, Stefan.
I deal with this.
Nash, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, I deal with this almost daily, especially with the project, Chasing Legends. It's we're all posting a lot about it, so people are seeing it more, especially people that know me that didn't necessarily know that I was doing anything like this or into this stuff. So I get asked about a lot about it at work and this and that. So I kind of have to explain it to people, and I try to kind of I almost dumb it down in a way, just because I don't know that person's understanding of certain things, but it's usually kind of, I usually get that reaction of, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. That's obviously they're just going to say that. They're not going to, to my face say, oh, that's pretty stupid. Like, why do you believe in that stuff? And that's kind of where I usually get the, oh, like Bigfoot and stuff. Like, yeah. Or a lot of people, right. Or, when a lot of people kind of bring it up, they kind of, like, you like ghost hunting stuff, don't you? I'm like, no, I don't ghost hunt. I do cooler things than that. I don't sit in a house. I sit out in the woods.
Absolutely. Karac?
I have to kind of agree with Nash a bit. I often find that more than me focusing on how they'll react, I am focusing on how I react to talking to them about it, because I feel that when I meet someone who doesn't know a whole lot about the field and I start talking about it, or they ask me about it, more than anything, I'm reminded of how little a lot of the stuff that we talk about actually gets out into media very much.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, the reason for a podcast like this. I mean, with Nash or Eli or you, Alex, I can just bring up the Skookum cast, or anytime I want
it's
to.
Like we know it right away.
Yeah, I say the word Skookum, and people are like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, really.
It's true.
And
it's true. It's true.
I'm like, oh, here's the dude, it's a blob of mud that someone poured cement into. So it's it can be really interesting like that, for sure. It's always a very amusing type of encounter, I think.
Oh,
yeah.
Eli?
I've been getting a strange response a lot lately, because I have my hydro flask here that I take to work. Obviously, Bigfoot's right there. I got Chasing Legends on it. Obviously, my logo, Cryptid Campfire, and whatnot. And so, people... Oh, there it is, Cryptid Campfire.
I have a similar water bottle.
There you go. And so most of the time when people ask me about, oh, you're into cryptids, their response is usually just no response. They just kind of, I think they just don't even understand, and they don't even want to ask. So it's it's not aliens, so it's not even as cool, I guess, to some people. So
I don't understand how,
I think that because I usually get hit with the ghost question a lot, and I just feel like since the ghost hunting side of things is way more mainstream, so that's kind of where everyone's head goes, especially when you just say paranormal.
Right.
So that's instantly where everyone's head goes, is that it's oh, you're a ghost hunter. No, I'm not. I haven't ghost hunted in years. And so then you have to explain to people well, what else is there? Well, you've got Bigfoot, Loch Ness, you got all these physical creature sightings that need love too. And I feel like it's almost it'd be easier just to tell people, I hunt ghosts, because it seems more accepted than me telling people that I wander around in the in the dark and in the woods where other things can kill me and have almost killed me, and look for these unknown creatures. And
yeah, definitely. I mean, I've gotten all those responses and more. I've gotten a couple ones where people are I'll explain to them a little bit. Like you said, there tends to be that dumbing down. I find it's easiest to talk to people about Bigfoot and Nessie, because people have heard of both of those things. And I say, well, there's sightings of Nessie-like creatures in lakes around the world. And I've gotten one of the interesting comments. I've only gotten a handful of times, but it's after I'll explain, you don't actually believe that, do you? I said, I mean, it's not really about whether I'm believing it or not. It's just I've done the research. I'm looking into it. I think it's interesting to entertain the possibility. That doesn't mean I'm 100% gung-ho on everything, but when you bring up things like the thylacine and the coelacanth, it can often be interesting. But there's the general just unknown factor with cryptozoology that people just aren't really familiar with it. They don't know much about it. And as you mentioned, what's so great about having circles like this is we can describe something that would be otherwise be completely obscure to people, and they'll know instantly what you're talking about, and it's just part of the conversation, which is what I love about just talking either you guys individually or as a group here. I think it's awesome. But I'm gonna interrupt this again for another we'll do another prize drawing. How's that?
All right.
So somebody asked in the comments, is this Bigfoot head from the Erickson Project, which is pretty funny. Another obscure reference. There was that photo that they claimed, which was called Matilda or something. It was clearly like a Wookiee head costume. So yes, maybe it is from the Erickson Project. But all right, this is now the drawing for the Sasquatch Out of the Shadows DVD. So this is a collection of some of my documentaries on the subject. So there's a terrible glare, but you can kind of see it. All right, so let's do that drawing. Let's shake up our Wookiee head, pop this open, and let's see what we got here.
Most of these prizes are just your projects, basically.
Peter Birdsall is the winner. Peter Birdsall. So if Peter is watching, congratulations. Contact me, and I will get that shipped out to you. All right, so we're 3 prizes down. Grand prize left to go, which we will do shortly. So that's the grand prize. So the pressure is increasing, but all right. Still more great questions popping in. Let's take this one from Jordan here, which is question for everyone. Is there anything in the cryptozoological field you wish you could change or feel is a negative aspect hurting the integrity of the subject besides the paranormal?
Yes.
Eli, why don't you start us out this time?
Okay, so this is actually kind of if we can piggyback it off of another question from a Whisper to a Scream Cryptids podcast.
Oh, yeah, sure. Let me just read that one. So it says, do you guys feel that the creepypasta and social media has distorted cryptozoology in any way? Has the involvement of such things as the Rake and the Slender Man altered public perception of cryptids? Yes, and it's annoying.
Yes, very much so. That's what I would change, basically, to answer the other guy's question. Is just it has become so. The internet has become both great and bad for cryptozoology. Because obviously, great because all of us live in different states and we're all talking to each other. But also bad because everyone's like, oh, like Slender Man's a cryptid, and it's like, actually, no, it's not. And it just gets so ingrained with it, and there's just a lack of discernment, I guess, especially on the internet when you have sites like Reddit that are just public forums. You never know where any of the stories are coming from. You can even reach out to the person, but there's no guarantee that that's even the person who the story originated from. It's like when everything's so anonymous, it's just disinformation can be spread so easily and things can be so confused, and all these crazy ideas get tossed around, and those are the ones that people latch onto the most. It's like the whole cover-up thing, that's a big internet theory, and it's like when I looked into it, I don't see a whole lot of, I don't think there is, but there's 1,000 Reddit articles that will say that I'm wrong, and they're a lot more exciting than why I think it's not real. you know?
Yeah, sensationalism is a massive part, I think, of the issue, and it manifests in a lot of different ways. To kind of echo the sentiment of creepypasta, especially with something like the Rake, for example, that was a whole conundrum because there are recorded sightings of things you could very much liken to that fictional story. The Dover Demon being among them, and that's a deer phenomenon as it is. But I think the biggest problem is that there is such a wellspring of ways in which you could accurately process and present information, but people don't really seem to have the motivation to actually put in the effort to do that, which is I've yet to figure out why that's the case. But I think it's good that we have programs like Cryptid Campfire, like Chasing Legends, or like what I'm trying to do with Crash Course Cryptozoology, where I'd like it to be educational more than anything. It's why I like doing things like the Cryptid Archetype video that I did recently. It's not a very big subject in cryptozoology whatsoever, but people get a small slice of psychology out of it. They get a small slice of history, talking about Carl Jung and things like that. And if that's a source that people have to go to because they won't do it themselves, that's fine. I think there is a lot of confusion that comes from just not researching stuff enough.
I gotta read this. Kevin is always great with the zingers. He's just great with these. I've got a rake in my shed, and even though it exists, I rarely ever have an encounter with it. He's always good with that. But there's some other comments coming through that I think are pretty interesting. Tactical Bigfoot Research says clickbait drives the content. Chris also says, I think monetization is a big part of the problem. Talking about YouTube specifically, I would have to agree. I mean, that's just part of the territory. The more sensational it is, the more clicks it's going to get, the more interesting people are going to find it. But Nash, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I feel like the internet, like Eli said, it's a blessing and a curse in a way, because obviously, it's allowed the four of us to, make good names for ourselves in the field, and obviously, connect and meet each other. But at the same time, you do have those people out there that use it, in the worst way possible. They're fabricating stories, they're creating evidence, I've found myself kind of unfollowing certain cryptid pages, even on Facebook and YouTube, because it's just, an onslaught of people posting things that it's like, if you have to draw a red circle on a grainy photograph, there's nothing there. Like there's, you're trying, and one of my favorite things though about posts like that is I usually see Karac in the comments just learning people, and just him and Adam Benedict from Pine Barrens Institute are like my two favorite people that I love seeing online, like interacting with people, because it's always just like, no, that's not what's happening. But yeah, I mean, there are definitely the people out there that really give it a bad name, and kind of make it difficult for the few of us that are actually in it for the right reason to make a good name, because there's so much misinformation out there. I feel like to kind of answer like the first question, another thing that I would change is, not everyone in the field is as friendly as the four of us are.
Definitely.
There are a lot, and it really holds the field back, because there are so many people out there that, they claim to be sitting on like the holy grail of, Sasquatch or lake monster information, but they hold it to themselves, or they want money for it, like, what Karac's doing with his, Baudette film project. And it's like it's information that could help drive the field forward, but it's theirs. They gotta, they hold it to themselves. If you want to know about it, you gotta come and meet with them, and they will show you in person what they're what they have. And I get it. Some people have their things, and they have their research, and they don't want to share it with people. I understand that. But if you have something that you are publicly claiming is gonna, just rewrite the history books or rewrite the, the biology books, and you've got definitive proof that Sasquatch exists, but I'm not gonna hold it because I need $15,000 if I'm gonna release, even a smidget of my information. You're not doing anything. You're not helping anybody. And if anybody in their right mind is gonna, pay you or even give you the time of day, it's crazy. Yeah. And that's what I've really enjoyed about, obviously, with the the three of you, is it's like everything is an open book. We all go to each other for something, like, oh, I know Alex knows this, I'll reach out to him. Oh, Eli knows I know this, so he'll reach out to me. We all pretty much go to Karac for everything, and it's there needs to be a unity, because if we can't all get along, then the field's not going to go anywhere. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why it hasn't gone, farther into the future with where it could be right at this point, is because there's so many people out there that are only in it for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a few thoughts on this topic. So just to kind of go back to that question, kind of combining a little bit Jordan and creepy or whispers, question about the creepypasta. Two things I would like to get out of cryptozoology entirely would, one, be those creepypasta stories, the infusion of stuff like Slenderman, Cthulhu. I don't know, these like things that are much more on the mythological folklore side. Along with that, all those lumberjack stories. Those lumberjack stories of Agro Pelter and all these kind of really insane lumberjack stories, the Paul Bunyan kind of stuff has somehow been fused into cryptozoology as well, which I kind of upsets me in some ways. But I don't have a problem with things like Mothman being considered cryptid, even though that's much more on the paranormal / UFO Men in Black sort of scale. But I think there's a spectrum. I think you have the weirder stuff on one side, maybe the Dover Demon. Towards the middle would be things like Bigfoot or other lake monsters that are perhaps biologically based. Then on the other side, you have things like mountain lions or mystery big cats, the thylacine, the coelacanth, the okapi. I don't think it necessarily has to be, one thing or the other. You have a spectrum. You can be interested in different things. When it comes to the sensationalism, I think that's a big problem. Absolutely. And that's a lot of people are in it for the money. Let's be honest. That being said, and people will accuse me of absolutely being bought and paid for. I've been accused of it before. If you make any money on this, people think you're somehow compromised. I do not think there's anything morally wrong with making money off of something you've put your hard work into. As we know with Chasing Legends, with the documentaries we do, these are not easy endeavors. We spend a lot of our own money. And the little money that we make, because it's not a lot of money in this field. I mean, people think you come in it to get uber rich. I mean, that's just not true. Right. And we're not taking CIA paychecks to spread disinformation. I mean, that maybe there are people that are doing that. I don't know. But I think, like, for example, we do these projects. Oftentimes they're crowdfunded. So the money that we're receiving, as with Chasing Legends, is from people that are interested in the subject that want to see us go out and investigate and look for this. And like I said, I don't think it's morally wrong to make money, and especially if you're using that money to put it back into the research, into the projects. And that toxicity in the field is really bad, because I mean, you get accused of all sorts of stuff just for, even monetizing your YouTube channel. I've gotten that a lot. Right. And I mean, this fundraiser I did last week, every single penny of that will be going to a charity. I mean, I'm not making any of that. I'm sending this stuff out. We'll do the last prize drawing, but I think, as you mentioned, not everyone is friendly. Well, we've experienced firsthand with certain people that are they're clearly in it on the ego level. They care more about themselves and their image than they do about the subject at hand. It's not about the monster at hand. It's the person and where they're going to go. So there's a lot we could change, and obviously there's just so much about this topic in particular, but we're going to have to move on here. I think we'll do the last drawing. What do you guys think?
Let's do it.
Sure. Do it.
All right. So this is for the grand prize, guys. This is the Freeman handprint cast. So this is going to be the last drawing here. Let's do that. We got our trusted Wookiee head.
Here we
This
go.
is going to be very dramatic here. All righty. Hand is in the bin. Let's see. All right. We've got Map 11. I know Map 11 posted a comment in here. Congratulations, Map 11.
Map 11.
You are the winner of the Freeman handprint. Awesome. So please get in touch with me. Congratulations to all of our winners. We have Map 11, Peter Birdsall, Mike from Tactical Bigfoot Research, and Stefan. So congratulations to all of our winners. Prizes are here. Please get in touch with me if I don't already have your contact information, and I'd love to get that stuff out to you guys. And thanks again for putting your submissions in and for contributing. Merlin's kids. I can't wait to get the money out to them and just help out the charity. I think it's a really great thing, and thank you guys all. Congratulations, Map 11. I see they're posting woohoo in the comments.
Yeah, heck yeah. That's a cool prize, man.
Thanks. That was a fun raffle. But moving on, I see we have a comment from Whisper the Scream podcast saying Karac is not friendly. He's devious. Yeah, Karac is. He's just Karac the Magnificent. He's a magician. He's playing tricks on all of us here.
We get it. Everyone likes Karac.
Seriously, that's exactly how I feel. I get it.
We get it. Yeah.
So this is a comment.
Laws.
I'm gonna read this comment from Macy, who I believe Karac is your significant other.
Yeah, that's my girlfriend.
Oh, wow.
Okay, she says So I wanted to read this because I thought it was funny. When Karac told me he was into cryptids, I didn't really grasp how into it he was. Half of the stuff he tells me goes right over my head, but I appreciate his passion. I think Nash and I know a couple ladies who are probably the same.
I feel it. It's exactly how it is. He's very supportive.
Thank you, ladies, for putting up with us. Thank you, ladies, for putting up with us. But quick question from Stefan. Question for Karac. What is the pendant on your necklace?
I love this story. So I actually got this. This is supposed to be a Tyrannosaurus Rex with like a. Oh, it is in my hair. Okay. Well, anyway, it's supposed to be like a Tyrannosaurus head along the claw sort of thing, but the top half has broken off, so now it's like a malformed duck, essentially. So
Giant duck.
something like that.
It's a malformed duck. Oh my.
That's what it looks like.
Now, yeah,
Oh, no.
I do want to read this comment. Kevin, always with good comments, says, doubters and skeptics will ignore the stories that may have credibility and focus on the wildest, most insane stories instead as a method to paint all cryptid stories with the same crazy brush. Yeah, I've found that some of the most interesting stories I've heard, whether they be eyewitness or otherwise, tend to be ones that I've never heard of before, or they're locally known in a certain town or a small community, and they're not really widely known. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look at some of the people that we've talked to, filming season 1 of Chasing Legends. Like, they had very isolated kind of private stories that you'd never hear about on any of the other, shows or whatnot that have covered some of these subjects. So it was really cool to kind of be the kind of ones to kind of break and kind of, I guess not necessarily break, but bring their kind of stories to light and kind of add it to the, the history of these, these creatures.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's interesting because I think that there is a kind of a lumping together that happens with not just unusual stories, but ones that might be considered like, whoa, that's kind of a little bit out there. I think it was Alex, you mentioned earlier, there is bafflingly still this conception that people have when they think of a cryptozoologist. They think of someone who is looking for that one lone Bigfoot who's been living out in the woods for thousands of years and has somehow never died. Or they think plesiosaur, the one plesiosaur that got frozen in ice at the end of the Ice Age and thawed in Loch Ness and has just been doing fine since then. And that isn't the case at all. I have yet to talk to anybody. As crazy as some people you meet in this field can be, I've yet to talk to one person who has that view. So it's not even like it's widely held or anything. It's completely a misreading that I think is presented probably by the media and the same kind of vice that people in the field have, which is that if you just dug a little bit deeper, you'd be more accurate in how you present this. But people don't dig very deeper, very often. So it's miscontrusions are such a harmful thing on both sides, I would say, in that case.
Yeah, I feel like it's like you said earlier, Karac. It's it's a lack of research, and I feel like people think of Bigfoot, they think of that one case. What gave it the name of Bigfoot? I find myself kind of just I go off of like the regional names and overall call them Sasquatch. That's just how I do it.
Yeah,
because it's just easier to it's just easier for me because I have so many stories in my head that I know about. It's just easier for me to kind of see it that way, where it's you're looking at the name Bigfoot became popular from one sighting of one creature of this alleged species, and people just think, like you said, it's there's just the one out there that runs around the world and is seen in these blurry photographs, or there's the one lake monster, and I think with Loch Ness, obviously it's just dubbed the Loch Ness monster. It's not monsters. Yeah. So people just think it's got to be one solitary creature, or with Champ and like other lake monsters, it's it just has that one name. It's not a plural, or obviously they gave Champ a more scientific name, but I think that doesn't. I mean, obviously it is what it is, and it's just kind of how things have been. But it if people are interested in this enough, they're going to look into it. But I think it comes to people like us to kind of help educate the uneducated. If they're interested enough to learn more about it, I'm more than happy to to explain these things to people. But I don't think that it necessarily helps in the sense because people don't look into the whole. They don't see the whole picture, I guess, like we do. Since obviously, because all of us have researched this stuff forever.
Sure. And not to like toot our own horns here, but we're all involved in different types of media when it comes to this subject. So Eli has Cryptid Campfire. It's an audio podcast where they talk about these sorts of things. So if you have a casual interest, that's a good way to learn perhaps about things that you haven't heard of before. I mean, things that necessarily might not even be cryptid related. Maybe it's another field. Karac does a lot of documentaries and a lot of stuff with Crash Course Cryptozoology. And as the name alludes to, you can just go on there and you start from a place where you have no idea and kind of gain knowledge about a certain subject. Or you can just go, if you're already into it, you can start looking into the stuff he's done about kangaroos on the loose. I mean, just let's say you're really into that subject. Then when it comes to something like Chasing Legends, obviously, I think it's a little bit more palatable to people who are more used to that TV sort of sense where, you know, we're not just out there making weird noises in the woods at night and hoping something happens. You know, we're talking to people who have had the encounters, and we're doing our best to do a scientific presentation about the environment. Maybe, you know, what we think is what role the environment plays in a certain creature, a certain legend, certain story, whether or not human involvement is in that as well. Obviously, as with some of the cryptids, and such as the Rougarou and the Pukwudgies, and you know, people have to wait to see that. But and that was one of the comments we had gotten was, I think, from Raptor Crazy, who said, "I would love to see documentaries. Love you guys. I watched a couple. Love to see more in the future." And that's something definitely. I mean, Karac, do you want to talk a little bit as we're sort of wrapping it up here? Let's talk a little bit about kind of upcoming projects. We'll start with Karac because I know Karac has a lot on his plate right now. So let's hear it from Karac.
Well, I'm getting ready to have released the Bodette film, which is a documentary I have on a piece of particular champ footage. That's coming out on Christmas, and that'll be the first kind of actually big documentary that I've done. I did a small one on the Minnesota Iceman back in May, and that's only about 20 minutes long or so. This is accumulating to about an hour and a half long, this one. And it'll be up on Christmas, and I'm hoping to have it go to DVD format in 2021. So it'll be on the channel for like a month, roughly speaking, and then go off again. And I haven't officially announced it on the Facebook pages, which is where I announce stuff usually yet, but I'm working on a Pukwudgie documentary called Wild Man at the Wampanoag that kind of centralizes around Pukwudgie sightings, but also covers other little people sightings around the continent and around the world. And I'm hoping to have that out by Halloween 2021.
And people can find this on your YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, release about that film will be on my YouTube channel. There's also, you know, like a piece of information I have about it where I'm just kind of talking about the documentary. There's a trailer or two for it on there. And I would think I would like to have it so that most of the documentaries that I do that go to DVD are on the channel for at least a little while, and then probably are just put back up at some point, maybe a year or two down the road or so. Because I would like this to be things that, if they're worthy of it, are very easy to access.
Sure. Eli, what's up with what do you got cooking there, bud?
Well, we just wrapped up our Cryptid Campfire episodes for 2020. Well, I guess actually there's one more next week.
That's true.
Yeah, that's not true. There's one next week. It'll be another live stream with Alex and Nash, and we're going to be talking about Chasing Legends, which is coming up in 2021. I'm super stoked. I'm sure Nash is stoked. I'm currently working on a series of my own called Mysteries of California. It used to be Southern California, but I expanded it to the whole of California. So, and hopefully I can get that going in 2021. I plan on releasing episodes as I complete them. So, hopefully soon, you know.
Awesome. Nash, obviously.
Yeah, I don't have anything.
Chasing
going on
Legends.
really.
Nothing. Yeah, we'll move on.
Yeah, so the first season of Chasing Legends, which we are all four of us really involved with, obviously Eli, Alex, and I physically, Karac kind of more behind the scenes usually.
He's basically an advisor.
Yeah, he's like our guy in the chair pretty much. But yeah, Karac's been a huge help on a lot of stuff with that, like seriously. But yeah, so we've got season 1 of that coming out, I think beginning of February is kind of what we're aiming for. It's 4 episodes covering Champ, Muggy Monster, Pukwudgie, Rougarou. It's really great. We had a lot of fun on the road this year, making it through COVID, and that kind of added some interesting elements to the filming. It's, if no one knows, it's kind of like kind of Alex said, it's kind of like that kind of typical TV show approach, but we kind of made it in a way that it's, you know, whether you're new to the field or are well experienced in the field, it's going to be good for everybody. That's a lot of information. We kind of put in that TV show format to kind of make it a little bit more familiar for people that are newer to it, but we kind of make it so that way for the seasoned investigator is getting something interesting out of it too, and hopefully learning something new. Each episode is going to be about 50 to 60 minutes long. Very destination truth style, like run and gun. We're really out there. We can document the whole experience of us investigating these cryptid legends and interviewing the people, and it's a lot of fun. So expect that soon. We got 3 trailers out. I think the next one comes out next week, right?
Yep,
I think
right after Christmas, post-Christmas present. Yeah.
Next Wednesday is the final trailer, so all 4 trailers will be out then.
Yeah, so those are episode specific, and then we're working on a actual full season trailer for probably sometime in January, something like that, as we're looking at. But yeah, I'm super excited for that. It's been such an awesome journey, and we've talked about it. We've had a bunch of shows on this in the past, obviously recaps. Super excited for that, and it's just going to be awesome.
We should talk about the Lake Champlain Zoological Inquiry, since we're all part of it.
Yes.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we have Scott Martis in the chat here. So Scott, tune in. Awesome. How you doing, Scott? So Scott obviously is a great champ researcher. So the Lake Champlain Zoological Inquiry, that's a group that we've all now become a part of. Karac is one of the founding members, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And our goal is, with a seasoned researcher like Scott, who's been investigating champ since most of us were before we were born, around the time we were, basically in diapers, I think, for all of us, because we're all in our 20s at this point. And so it's really, I don't know exactly what our goals will be going forward. I know we have a bunch of different people from different areas. Obviously, all of us are in it. Some of us are more on the technical side of camera stuff. Some of us are more on the ground kind of research. I don't know exactly how it's going to work, but it's going to be really interesting. I'm excited to hopefully get to do an expedition at some point. Lake Champlain is one of my favorite places in the world. So, Karac, I mean, you want to say a little bit more about the group and kind of how it came into being?
Sure. Yeah. It's funny. Making Release the Bodette film was the genesis of the LCZI because partially because we had such a, I guess you would say, unique experience to some extent filming it research-wise. And Scott and I talked a lot, and Jeremy Sanborn, Ryan Sanborn and I talked a lot. And we decided that maybe this kind of more unique approach that relies way more heavily on what can be recorded, what can be replicated, this kind of just going into the scientific approach to it might be the way to go to figure out what's going on, because those are the kinds of investigations that have been there before that have turned up, the echolocations in interesting sonar readings. Almost every bit of the most significant data that we have from Lake Champlain was achieved using a really very restrictive, scientific approach to it instead of an observational expedition or anything like that. So I guess the goal is to conduct scientific inquiry and measure the resulting data and leave our goal open-ended in the sense that we're not looking to prove or disprove a monster of any kind. We're looking to figure out, why is there a monster story in the first place? Maybe the answer ends up being there's a monster. But maybe if not, we need to have a group that's asking, well, if there is no monster, why the hell are thousands of people reporting that there's a monster? So that's just as interesting a question. Yeah.
There's
definitely. I think having somebody... Yeah, I mean, as we've all been there, we've all been, obviously, Nash and Eli were there when we filmed our Chasing Legends episode, which is really right after the heels of Karac filming Release the Bodette.
I guess that was only a few weeks.
Excuse me. Having somebody like Scott Martis in this group is really awesome. He's obviously been in Monster Quest. I mean, I had Doug Hychek on, who produced that recently. He's been on various other programs, but he's been researching it for such a long time. I knew Scott previously, as he was one of the main subjects of my documentary series on the Trail of Champ for Small Town Monsters in 2017. And Scott, right off the bat, was just such a treasure trove of knowledge. I mean, you could ask him about one little bay or inlet in Lake Champlain, and he would send you over a PDF, 5 PDFs within half an hour. He'd say, hold on, let me send you something over. I mean, the guy's a treasure trove. So he's like an encyclopedia to have on the project. I had him on the show, I think it was in November. So if folks watching want to check that out that haven't seen it, check it out. He talks about a lot more than just Champ. He may be helping us in the future with Chasing Legends stuff in terms of other aquatic cryptids. I mean, he's just that knowledgeable about that whole field, not just Champ, but I think Champ is really kind of his mainstay, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the soul of the LCCI right there. Is Scott Marsh is a walking library. It's insane. And he gave me this enormous file to use for at least the Woodhead film that itself is like, you know, a few gigabytes of information. So it's really, really cool.
I got to read this question. I got to read this comment from our grand prize winner, which is Map 11. Says, I have a lot of Vermont connections. Please let me know if I can assist with your Champ quest with people, boats, stuff like that. Awesome. Yeah, it's so nice to hear that. We already have sort of a network of Champ people, and obviously we met some great folks while we were up there in September. We know some awesome folks. Having another name to add to the list, because you never know when you're out there having trouble with boats and weather and all sorts of stuff, what can change. It's really good to have people who are willing to help. So thank you, Map 11, and I will be talking to you anyway about the prize there. But Scott says thank you. Yeah,
we really lucked out with the guys from Champ Tracker. I can't even think of their names. I see their names every time I look on Facebook.
John and the people up in St. Albans Bay, and that's an area I want to take this project.
John Montaigne.
Because, you know, so much of the research has been focused on the Port Henry area, or even the mid to lower section of the lake, but there really hasn't been a whole lot in St. Albans. And again, that's I mean, let's not forget that's where the most famous Champ photo and the Mancy photo was taken from there. I mean, why not focus there? There's been recent sightings there, as we found. So I think it's going to be interesting, and I'd love to see how it goes forward and how we can make it work. We're all in different parts of the world, but you know, if we can make this work and at least do some sort of an endeavor, because Champ is really something special. I mean, even if there is nothing mysterious in that lake, which I think there is, the lake itself, the natural beauty, I mean, the wonder, as we all saw, it's just unbelievable. There's nowhere like it.
Oh yeah,
couldn't agree more.
Beautiful area.
But so, is anyone in a rush here? Do you guys want to keep talking, take a few more questions, or what do you guys think?
I don't mind talking. Let's go for it.
Let's do it.
I don't think any of us mind talking.
Eli's like, I want to get out of here. I'm sick of these guys.
Oh yeah, totally.
I'm just kidding. But I think there's an interesting. I want to take this question from a Whisper to a Screams podcast. We're killing it with the questions tonight. This is a kind of controversial, but any thoughts on people tying religion into cryptozoology? I know there's a huge number of people who believe they are Nephilims or demons, and there's kind of been a conversation going on. You know, some people have been led astray. They're commonly saying that all cryptids are Nephilim and that sort of stuff. And I'll start out with this one. I don't necessarily think there's a problem people coming into the subject with, a religious background. I think everyone in some way has some sort of belief system that they come from. I mean, I come from a Orthodox Christian background, and I've made that clear before in the show, and I've talked about it. And I think there's a lot of people that, they come into it and they say, oh, Bigfoot is definitely a Nephilim, or it's Cain that's talked about in the Bible, or so many of these other examples. They'll talk about Enkidu in Epic of Gilgamesh. What I think is really interesting is if you're looking at religion, I mean, a universal thing that basically humans all have, something they worship, some sort of religion. There's stories that are very similar. And if we're talking about the Native American cultures, I mean, Bigfoot is sort of a part of that belief system. I think it is in a lot of other cultures. And Hinduism, I mean, they have I forget the name of the god, but one of these gods is this like human half ape that lives up in the Himalayas. I mean, is that the Yeti? I don't know. Hanuman, exactly, which is, kind of like a monkey man sort of thing. And there's a whole monkey man subject within India, as I'm sure you guys are aware of, kind of the monkeys being seen.
Even aside of that, like the Yeti just on its own is looked at as a god.
Yeah. Wild men in religion. Sorry, go on.
Oh no, you're absolutely right. I mean, if you think about even just tying it in with Santa Claus and the origins with the hairy wild men and those sorts of things, and all these various European folklore that have to deal with hairy people, I don't necessarily see. I understand what they're trying to say, and the point that's being conveyed is that people are coming into it and saying this is absolutely what Bigfoot or what this is, and all cryptids are somehow demons or whatever. I don't necessarily think that's true, but I think if you're coming at it from a religious perspective, sure, that's fine. I mean, obviously there's science and religion in a lot of ways aren't compatible, but I don't really see an issue in some senses. If you're going to say that all living creatures are God's creatures or God's creations, why not then say, well, there's unknown creatures that we just don't know about that are, to us as humans, we are fallible. In most religions, they will argue that humans are fallible. We are untrustworthy. We need to repent for things that we do. In all religions, basically, that more or less, there's that sort of attitude. So who are we to assume that everything that is known is out there? Is there nothing we don't know about? I mean, how would that be possible? There's absolutely, we know everything that's out there. I mean, that I think you have to look at it then and say, well, be humble and say, well, no, that can't be the case. Humans are not, we don't know everything that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that knowing that there's an inherent flaw with the observational skills of people on a very wide scale is, I saw the Alex Trebek thing.
This comment, Kevin is killing me with the comments. He's great.
It's so intrinsic to understanding this, because I guess at that point, one of the questions that you'd ask fundamentally with that kind of question is, okay, well, let's say we're talking about when specifically Nephilim or giants are referenced in biblical scriptures, right?
Sure.
So there is a few things that need to be agreed upon for that to be the next question. One of them, and I think the most fundamental one, and this is with all cultures, is this scripture referencing an actual giant, or are we talking an archetypal or a metaphorical giant? I've read a few of the passages that people highlight for specifically the Bigfoot Nephilim discussion. And as far as I'm concerned, looking at other pieces of religious literature from around the same time period around the world, the way it's worded, I think personally, leaves it open-ended as to whether or not the scripture means an actual giant or a giant in the sense that we call people who are very accomplished giants. Because it's kind of vague in its wording in that sense. So we need to agree on that first. And the second thing you need to agree upon is, well, is it possible, even in the first place, that there could be an archetypal thing that resembles an actual thing? And that's a difficult question, because wild men pop up all throughout the world. In basically every single culture, there is a wild man. And the wild man usually looks suspiciously like a Bigfoot. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's based off of that. That's one of the biggest points that I made when I made a lecture talking about the Yeti as it's represented in Indian and Nepalese archaeology. And the Yeti, Nash, you mentioned the Yeti is like a god in that religion. It's even more than that. The Yeti is fundamental to the creation story of a lot of those religions. The two prime beings that exist before the rest of the world is a regular monkey and a Yeti. And, well, what becomes a Yeti later on in the mythology, I should say. And, that's really important, that people have this idea that the thing that is a cross between a man and an animal is intrinsic to the nature of the world. So it's a really, it's not surprising that there's so much contention about it, because it's just so unclear. And at the same time, the line it treads is so thin that it's difficult to know, well, are we looking at a real account that's been translated into mythology, or are what we perceive as accounts themselves actually just mythology that we're misreading?
May I chime in?
No. Go for it.
No.
Yeah. Well, I guess returning to the Nephilim thing really quick, and then I'll pivot to something else. But I think, Karac, we can't argue over the translations. Different versions of the Bible say different things. Some versions of the Bible don't even mention Nephilim. They just say giants. So what's important to look at is to look at the original Hebrew in which it was written in which case it does imply literal giants. So But even then, I consider all of that's just semantics. We're arguing over semantics here, because what we really need to look at is what we can deduce. Can you say, after hearing the Albert Ostman story, oh, he was kidnapped by a squad of Nephilim? There's a whole lot of logical leaps going on there. And I guess to kind of paraphrase an evolutionary theorist, Stephen Jay Gould, because I myself have, religious beliefs, and that affects the way you're going to look at this topic of cryptozoology, obviously.
Sure.
And he was kind of describing it, that he sees evolution as existing apart from a deity. He doesn't have a problem with people believing in evolutionary creationism. But when you're looking at how evolution works, there is no evidence to suggest that the reason things evolved the way they did was because there was a controlling deity, So I feel like when you're out looking for Sasquatch, you can't say to yourself, oh, these are descendants of the Nephilim. I think you already have a preconceived notion. That's already, you broke the scientific method. It's not going to work anymore, because I don't know, that it just it won't work with you're not open to having your ideas changed. You have your mind set in stone off of something that's not even really concrete in the first place, And I'm not bashing religion here. I'm just, the connection between cryptids and Nephilim and demons is, I don't feel concrete in any way. So
that's a really that's good set of points. You just schooled me.
No, I agree. I mean, I think that's the problem, where you have these folks that are coming in from a certain strain of Christianity, perhaps, or whatever their religious background is, saying, oh, Bigfoots are 100% giants or Nephilim. Recently I talked to Denver Michaels, who's written a lot about giants, and he's really interested in that sort of stuff. He says people are more in the giant world, that, there's these, as Avon Scott has mentioned, the classic description of Nephilim is 6 fingers, red hair, and double rows of teeth. And a lot of people more into that side of things, they kind of push back on the Bigfoot idea. They say that the Bigfoot stuff is honestly just Bigfoot people wanting to attribute the Nephilim to Bigfoot. And they're saying, well, what we think is more along the lines of the giants being larger humans, just big humans. As we mentioned, there's different variations in size of people based on genetics or environmental adaptations. People talk about places like the Lovelock Cave in Nevada with the red-haired giants, and a lot of these sort of hearsay stories. And people more in that field say, well, no, it's not really Bigfoot. It's something different. Bigfoot is a different subject. I think it's just people coming, as with Eli mentioned, with a preconceived notion of their religious background, completely letting it take over what they think about a field. They see Bigfoot and they just put whatever they are thinking about in their head as the explanation. That is the explanation. There's no room for other possibilities. And I disagree with that as somebody, as Eli said, with sort of a religious background. I would disagree with just coming into it that blindly and just sort of attributing it.
Yeah, I think Eli brings up the best point you could bring up, which is that preconceived notions, whether religious or not, are kind of one of the antitheses of field work that can be conducted properly. I was just talking with someone yesterday about, I think it was about the dermal ridges, actually, and they had mentioned that it seemed like the way that they were positioned was contained attributes of both how non-human primates and how human dermal ridges are set. They're going in kind of these converging directions. And they attributed that to Nephilim, which they described as a kind of the hybrid view of Nephilim. And I had mentioned, well, do you think it could just be that it's like a human-like primate or a non-human primate like human? And what's so interesting is that I also thought to myself, well, I can say that, and that's a valid point. But what if tomorrow I had some kind of strangely religious experience that changed my entire paradigm? And I need to be able to be accounting for that, because people, if I'm going to consider that people see a Sasquatch, I have to consider the wide variety of people that say there are religious or paranormal experiences attributed to the world that change your view of that kind of phenomenon. So to not put stock in anything until it's really definitive is so important, I think. And Eli, you highlighted that perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is really an interesting discussion that could go on. I mean, for such a long time, if we're talking about it. I mean, because we talk about it. Let's say we see people that claim to have seen the Virgin Mary or things like the stigmata. I mean, that's once you get more into that, those are seemingly more paranormal. I guess you would consider them when we're coming from a cryptid sort of area. But definitely an interesting kind of area to talk about. And I think, thank you to a Whisper, to a Screams of Cryptid podcast for the question. I think we had some great questions tonight and some really great conversations. And, if you guys are all set, I mean, we'll kind of wrap things up here. But I'd love to do something like this again. This has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's really great.
So, yeah.
For sure.
We got links
What
to
happens when you get all
everyone's
four of us in a
channel.
room together?
Yeah, right.
So I have links to all of our websites and channels and that kind of stuff in the comments below. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, and thanks for your awesome questions tonight, awesome conversations. Thank you, Kevin, for always the entertaining and funny comments. Scott, everyone who tuned in, Mike, and then our winners. Obviously, again, just to go over for our winners, please contact me. So we have Stefan, Mike, Tactical Bigfoot Research. I have their contact information. Peter Birdsall, who's the winner of the DVD. So I see Peter's been posting comments. You can leave a comment down below how I can contact you, or just shoot me an email at sasquatchoutoftheshadows@gmail.com. And then Map11, if you can leave me your contact information so we can get those prizes out to you guys. And thank you again for contributing. I'm sure Merlin's kids will be really grateful. We're going to feed some dogs and hopefully make a difference with some of that sort of stuff. So
Good.
Thank you again, guys. It's been awesome. This has been phenomenal. I love this kind of format. Hope to do it again.
Yeah, it was fun.
Definitely. And a reminder, guys, next week's show will be the last show of the year. It's going to be another sort of, not necessarily a panel like this, but we're going to have on Chad Lewis, friend of the show. He's been on this program before, as well as Kevin Nelson and Joe Tury. They're going to be talking about their Bigfoot documentary about the big muddy monster of Illinois. Really excited about that. They're great storytellers, both Kevin and Chad. And I know Joe, he's a pretty awesome filmmaker. So great discussion. And that'll be the last show of the year. So it'll be an awesome way to wrap out 2020. It's been an awesome time on this program. And thank you all again for tuning in. Thank you guys for taking the time out to join the panel. And we will definitely have to do this again.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. Have a great week. Merry Christmas to everybody that's celebrating Christmas this week. Happy Hanukkah, if there's anything still going on with that. I'm not too educated on that sort of stuff. Obviously, New Year coming up, but just Merry Christmas to all those who are celebrating, the Western Christians who are celebrating now. So we'll see you guys all next week. Have a safe rest.
Tune in to Cryptid Campfire next Tuesday.
Yeah, please do. It'll be on YouTube.
Yeah, we'll be doing a live. So we'll do another one of these sorts of things on Cryptid Campfire. But all right, guys, have a good night.
Bye.